Today, we're going to talk about the situation with SVB, which is Silicon Valley Bank. They have just gone bankrupt as of this recording today. So this is almost like an emergency podcast. And we're going to talk about some high level around it first and what we believe will actually happen with the US government stepping in. So Neil, you want to add some context?
First off, I don't think they went bankrupt. The government more so just shut them down. So there was no quote unquote official bankruptcy or anything like that.
But same kind of...
It depends. Bankruptcy proceedings are very different. Right now, what ended up happening is Silicon Valley Bank, I believe, had some investments in some bonds or something like that, went bad, or they were pretty much lacking, like, I think, what, $2 billion? And then they were going to raise 500 from General Atlantic, 1.5 from someone else, or somewhere around there. But nonetheless, none of that stuff really matters. What really matters is everyone started pulling out their money from Silicon Valley Bank. VCs, everyone just said, take your money out of Silicon Valley Bank. And it's really hurt them, so much so that the government just stepped in and shut down their operations. And the FDIC is there to protect insured depositors, but the FDIC only protects $250,000. Yep. And my prediction is the government will hold people up on everything they had in their accounts. Because think about it this way. If you have a lot of businesses with 2, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, and you only give them 250,000, you won't just lose a bank. You're going to lose a lot of corporations. You're going to lose a lot of jobs, and it's going to create a big shitstorm. And I don't think they have a choice but to really bail people out and help them out.
Yeah. So I actually think Neil's right on the shutdown of vernacular versus the bankrupt one. I just like using the term more, but they're actually very different. And you have different forms of bankruptcy too. It's not just a thing that can happen overnight. So I think Neil's right. I believe they invested in a bunch of bonds that were relatively safe because they had all this cash. And the bonds are basically paying 1.5% or so. But obviously, the interest rates have changed over the years. And that's one piece of it, right? There's much more of a liquidity crunch for them. And so maybe the government stepping in to say, hey, we're going to clean things up over here. And it's very much, this is what's known as a bank run right now. So yesterday, actually, I'm in a chat group with a handful of founders. And one of my friends in there said he's in these other chat groups and 1.2 billion was withdrawn. I think another 850 million was withdrawn from like another chat group. And then today I was just telling Neil before we started recording this podcast that my friend just went to withdraw money too. And then my buddy yesterday, the startup that he works at, they have 400 grand in there. He pulled the whole thing out yesterday. And so when you have a bank run like that, then this is where a situation where the government needs to step in. And because here's the downside to this, like the government doesn't step in and like kind of bail them out a little bit. You have a lot of startups in this situation where I've spoken at a lot of conferences where SVB is like the main sponsor. They're sponsoring a bunch of things. They're very founder friendly. They're very focused on helping startups. And they've helped some of the best startups in the world. I think everybody would talk about SVB. They're like a well-known entity and a well-known brand. And I think that's what will happen. And maybe this makes the case for Bitcoin in the future, but that's not what we're talking about today.
Yeah, no, and even Bitcoin has dropped since all this banking fiasco started happening. A lot of the other stocks started tanking from this news as well.
Also, Jerome Powell too this week said we're going to keep jacking it up. So
yeah, jacking up interest rates. But I do believe the government will make people whole. I just don't really see any way around it, because if they don't, what are you going to have? A lot of companies fail, a lot of jobs failing, although they want more unemployment in theory. But it's going to create a massive ripple effect. And I don't think that the government wants it, and B, it'll have people lose trust in the overall banking system if this happens.
What if, okay, here's a conspiracy theory that people can think about here, and we'll leave you with this, but what if the government, they shut them down, effectively taking them over, and they're selective about who they let go bankrupt, and so they can increase the unemployment rate? But that's probably not going to happen. That's just a conspiracy theory. Anything else you want to add here, Neil?
Think about it this way. Like a few days ago, like less than a month ago, their market cap was roughly 3 times the size. So you're talking about not a $6 billion, you're talking about an $18 billion market cap company. If you have an $18 billion company just fail overnight in the financial space, consumers are just going to start losing trust in the whole banking
ripple
system.
Effect.
That's why I think they're going to make people whole on the money.
Yep. And they got to do it quickly too.
Yep.
Anyway, that is what it is. That is it for today. This was an emergency episode. Please don't forget to rate, review, subscribe. It helps us grow. And you know what we might even do? Because on Riverside now we can add live call-ins. If you rate, review, subscribe, we'll randomly call on people for a random call-in one day, and then we can just answer one of your questions live. So that is it for today. That's our incentive for you. And we will see you tomorrow.